The Weekly Wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Andrew Williams.
Let's get into the biggest news story. And of course, this is what the media is calling what could be the biggest trial, biggest murder trial of the decade, maybe even the century, depends on who you're talking to. I'm, of course, talking about Erin Patterson's guilty verdict this week.
That happened after 9 weeks of evidence, 7 days of deliberation by the jury, and then they delivered their verdict, which was guilty on all 4 counts. So that's 3 counts of the murders of her in-laws, Don and Gail Patterson, and Gail's sister Heather Wilkinson, and then 1 count of attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson. So the jury found that she used death cap mushrooms that were served in beef Wellington at a family lunch. Why she did that isn't known, and we'll come back to that point in a second. But the moment itself was stark. Guilty, 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 guilty.
Yeah, Erin Patterson, spent 8 days in the witness box explaining her version of events, claiming that it was all a tragic accident. Reports say that she remained silent and pretty composed when that guilty verdict was delivered, which brings us to what we've learned now that it's all over. There has been a deluge of new information.
Yeah, if you were obsessed with this case to begin with, you've had quite the week because so much more has come out since that guilty verdict. Article after article, social post, hot take, analysis. So much has been written and posted and broadcast. For our purposes, we'll stick to the factual information rather than what my group chat thinks about this case. That would be a bad idea.
I think it's probably best we try and stick to the factual information. And look, almost as soon as that verdict was delivered, there was a report. This is sort of the first that popped up. It was a report quoting her former air traffic controller colleagues. They painted a picture of someone that they call Crazy Erin.
Yeah, so they described her as aggressive and strange and prone to making false sick leave calls in order to pick up lucrative overtime shifts.
Yeah, the next one I saw was a report about a 2004 drink driving conviction. She was nearly 3 times over the legal limit, crashed an unregistered car and fled the scene. And then there were all of these sort of, I guess, more in the hot take category.
Yeah.
Lots of people and commentators talking about small but telling details. For example, why would you wear white pants after claiming to suffer explosive diarrhea from mushroom poisoning?
Yeah, there's not a lot of dignity in a murder trial, is there?
No.
And there's some takes on the poison dish that she made as well. So the crime writer John Sylvester, you may well have heard his name, particularly if you live in Victoria. He pointed out that if you're making beef Wellington and you need a large eye fillet, there was a butcher across the road from the Woolworths where she claimed that she could only buy pre-cut steaks.
Yeah, the inference there being she said she wanted a big fillet but couldn't get it at Woolworths, but maybe actually the individual serves were what she wanted so she could control who got what. Experts also bought into this. Criminologist Xanthi Mallet was one who wrote this week about how what she thought from that first driveway interview in 2023. Of course, that's one of those scenes fixed in my mind as she's sort of getting down the driveway and into her home. What Xanthi said is she thought at that moment something was off. She wrote, as a criminologist, I've seen crocodile tears many times before, and I saw them that day. It was clear to me at that moment that she felt no real sympathy for what her family members were going through.
So we've had experts weighing in with their takes. We've had a lot of analysis and, as you say, it's just flooded in ever since the guilty verdict. But there has been some pushback against this sort of tilt that's happened to true crime entertainment that has happened in the last week. So Candice Fox wrote in The Guardian about this. She warned about how armchair detectives got it wrong with cases involving other women like Joanne Lees or Lindy Chamberlain and Kathleen Folbig, because we can't spot killers by their behaviour on site. And if we could, these sorts of trials would be a lot easier. So that is something to keep in mind as you're reading and consuming all of this. As for what's next, this is far from over. So there's already an ABC drama series that's in development, and we can expect books, documentaries, and surely many more podcasts.
It's quite notable that acclaimed author Helen Garner was also there taking notes for some of that trial. If she writes the book, that's probably the one that I'm absolutely going to dive into.
It'll be an absolute must-read if that comes along. There are some other consequences to note here. So Dr. Chris Webster, the emergency doctor who first suspected that Patterson was the perpetrator, he revealed that he might lose his job for speaking to the media at all.
Yeah, he did a couple of interviews this week with the Victorian-based newspapers, and it was the one with the Herald Sun that has landed him in some pretty hot water. He said that he suspected Patterson was a murderer because of her behaviour when she presented to hospital, also because of her story about the beef Wellington lunch. He told the Herald Sun that he thought that she was a disturbed sociopathic nutbag.
Yeah, and all of which to say, for the Pattersons and Wilkinsons, this verdict brings this chapter to a close. But as a lot of experts have pointed out this week, families of murder victims never really achieve true closure.
No, especially when the person responsible is one of their own. So the person who was caring for them and part of their family is now being shown to be the murderer. So her children, a lot of commentary about that too. They've lost their grandparents and now they've lost their mother, essentially. As a convicted murderer, she potentially faces life in prison. Andrew, just back to the motive point, one of the unsettling things is that Erin Patterson herself remains the only person who truly knows what happened.
And you might be wondering, is that ever going to change? We've been reading a few things from criminologists and forensic psychiatrists this week on that subject, and the prevailing view from them is that they expect that she will never tell what her motive was. So the theory there is that her silence is essentially the final way that she can maintain control over the situation.
Yeah, a really terrible situation it is too. Sentencing is likely in August or September, and we're still waiting to hear whether Erin Patterson is going to lodge an appeal.